So we've gone from just shaming to outright violence, and even, as far as I'm concerned, a domestic act of terrorism. Well, where's the hue and cry from the mainstream media? Why are there not investigations? Why are there not panels of congresspeople standing on the steps of the hallowed congressional Capitol building? And why are we not hearing an outcry of no justice, no peace? Well, that's right, because all of this was done to people, patriots, who simply want to exercise their freedom, especially you no good Christians. That's why. You know, when you think Mississippi, you think the Bible Belt. Despite the fact that there is a movie, Mississippi Burning, which tells the plight of what African Americans, black Americans, were put through in the Deep South during the Civil War segregation era, and it was certainly awful, inhumane, a terrible way to treat our fellow man. No one's making light of that. No one wants to gloss that over, and we should not forget it. Yet at the same time, when we think of the South, we think of church on every corner. We think of a place where people can go that would not be like New York or California, where you could openly, freely express your religious views, your wantingness, and your right to be able to worship as you choose. But yet, Mississippi has drawn a lot of attention recently because they seem to have some of the most, I don't know what the word is. The governor has said he wants churches to worship, that they're essential. Federal judges have stepped in and said the churches can worship. Yet there are mayors and local municipalities and sheriffs that are going in and shutting services down. A pastor that I know of had his drive-in church canceled. He was actually just standing on the sidewalk with a small PA system preaching to parked cars, but because they lowered their windows so they could hear what he was saying, it looked like a convergence of a SWAT team on that property and handing out fines to people sitting in their cars listening to preaching in the United States. Well, one church in Holly Springs, Mississippi, decided to demonstrate what was actually happening by going inside of a Walmart and showing, hey, look, this is a Sunday. People are in Walmart. They can do this safely. Why can't they come inside the church building? And what happened is awful. Somebody decided to burn it to the ground.
State and federal investigators have been called in to investigate a fire they believe was intentionally set at the First Pentecostal Church in Holly Springs, Mississippi.
That church has been involved in some recent controversies as a result of the pandemic.
It's just hard to wrap your head around the idea that someone may have orchestrated this or done this.
Pastor Jerry Waldrop is trying to make sense of what happened to his Holly Springs church early Wednesday morning. It's not the first time the church has made headlines recently. It recently filed a federal lawsuit against Holly Springs after the city cited Waldrop for violating the stay-at-home order by having services in the church instead of a drive-up service on a stormy Easter Sunday. The church claims the restrictions violates its First Amendment rights. To prove a point, Waldrop's congregation recently walked into Walmart on a Sunday to show that people are allowed to gather at the store, but not in church. He says he has no idea who would have possibly set his church on fire.
Who knows? I mean, the investigation's going on and we're just waiting to see what they tell us.
Church members hugged and cried in the parking lot as investigators sifted through the rubble for clues to figure out who might have done this.
We've kind of racked our brains and we have no idea. No enemies that we know of.
Well, let me just say, Pastor, you do have enemies. First of all, Satan is an enemy. And he is doing everything that he can to try to stop and silence churches. But you also have another enemy, an enemy from within. And these are these un-American globalists, hate this president, hate the agenda of let's make America great again. And they certainly hate churches. Why? Because churches like yours symbolize the Christian right. And where does the Christian right line up ideologically and politically? With the guy in the White House that they hate. But they also hate the church because the church, if it's a Bible-believing, Bible-preaching church, it stands against things that they are for. It stands against lifestyle choices and ways that people want to live their lives guilt-free, moral-free. You stand up against abortion. You stand up for traditional families, traditional faith, traditional values. They want to silence you. You are their enemy. They want you quiet. And they are using this man-made created pandemic as a way to silence the church. They want the light to go out. Doing YouTube church and Facebook church is not the same. Today I had to do a funeral, and I was talking with the funeral director, and I know her family. She is a born-again Christian. She's not a member of my church, and we were talking a little bit how their church this past Sunday did tailgate services, where you, like a tailgate party, you could sit on the back of your tailgate of your vehicle or sit in a lawn chair in front of your vehicle, and they did church that way. We have been doing for about 6 weeks drive-in church. I have a small FM transmitter, and people can sit in their cars, and we transmitted the service that way. And I was out in the parking lot through all kinds of weather. I'm telling you, mailman's got nothing on me. You know that old motto, rain, sleet, hail, snow, the mail will always get through. Well, Pastor Marty can deliver a sermon and weather like that too. This coming Sunday, we're going back inside. She and I, as we were talking, she said, it's just not the same watching it on a screen. And no, it's not. And we have a constitutional right to meet. We absolutely do. In fact, I have said this before and I will say it again. When you are waiting for permission to exercise your constitutional right, you've already ceded the fact that you don't have a right. You have a privilege. And privileges can be granted and privileges can be taken away. I don't simply have a privilege of worshiping the Lord. I have a constitutional right that allows me to do such. This pastor exercising his constitutional right. Now, let me just say, I don't know if a member of his church, to make a point, might have been the arsonist here. That very well could be. I'm just at a loss here, and I shouldn't be. The media, if this had been a mosque, if this had been a black church, right away we would have had endless news stories that would have just looped over and over, day in and day out, about white supremacy, racism, and it somehow would have been linked back to Donald Trump and Trump supporters. Yet the media is always so silent on groups like Antifa and militants on the political left that take things into their own hands and acts of violence. No, they're left and progressive and we are non-violent. Really? Really? How many homegrown terrorists and acts of terrorism have actually been from the right and how many have been from the left? How many back during the protest of our involvement in Vietnam, and there were acts of violence and groups like, man, the American People's Revolutionary Movement, man. Was that a right-wing group or a left-wing group? Exactly. Exactly. Don't act like the left never does violence. Don't act like the left defecates and it comes out marble and doesn't stink. Don't be like that. My point is really simple on this. There's a video footage of a woman in a supermarket being screamed at, berated, and F-bombed because she wasn't wearing a mask and they were. And they were getting kind of violent, threatening. Again, this is coming from the left. Now we have people, because you meeting and worshiping, you're going to kill people, man. So you burn the church to the ground? Because you think I ought to wear a mask, you're now going to berate me? Governor Cuomo, the emperor of the Empire State of New York, signed into executive law today, authorizing businesses they can deny service to people who are unmasked. I told you this yesterday. This whole masking agenda is all about, they want that image. They want wherever you go to see people in masks, because that image is fear. Fear. We can't go here. We can't do this. It's too soon. The health department in California is now telling Governor Newsom he's opening up too quickly. My daughter is in process of moving out and leaving California today because the restrictions are so stringent. She is there as a church planting missionary. She's having to leave because she can't function. There's nothing she can do. So her mission board is bringing her back to Florida. She'll work from there until she can actually return to California and do something physically there. And yet, they're being told they're opening too quickly. Protesters are in the streets in California. Protests are breaking out across this country. And yet, it's the left that's burning down the churches, shaming people, threatening. But should we be surprised? Remember, it was Mad Maxine Waters who was saying, if you see one of these members of Trump's cabinet, supporter of Donald Trump, whether they are at a restaurant, a gasoline station, you get in their faces. And remember, there were acts of violence against Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, when she was the press secretary for the president, was derided out of a restaurant with her family. Same thing happened to Ted Cruz. I'm unaware of where we have done this to the left. But the left does it to us, and it's seen as some type of glorified act of patriotism. You know, sometimes you have to fight absurdity with absurdity. And if they absolutely mandate that I can't leave my house without a mask, I may be a pastor, but I'm going to find the nastiest, most vulgar mask I can find, and that's what I'm going to wear. I mean it. Nasty, vulgar. Oh, don't tell me you can't serve me. Don't tell me I can't come in here. I have a mask on. Sometimes you have to push back. Well, what about offer the other cheek? Well, they burned it to the ground. I'd say we're out of cheeks now. It is time to stand up en masse and say enough. They don't want you to wear a mask on the left because they're trying to save your life and they're worried about health. They want the image. They want the fear. They want to drag this out until November. Mark it down. We're wondering if we can return to school in the fall, and if we can, what that's going to look like. Community Little Leagues are opening up around me. Not the actual Little League organization, but when towns have their own youth baseball, softball programs. And it's insane. Parents can't go to the games. No one can sit in the stands. When the players are in the field, they don't have to wear a mask, but when they're sitting in the dugout, they have to be a mask unless they're in a position like that of the catcher, where they're requiring catchers to wear a mask and then put a face or the catcher's mask over the face mask. that can't even remotely be healthy. And when some of these kids start dropping like flies, I hope these parents sue these community sports organizations into the ground, and then in turn I hope that these community sports organizations turn around and sue their governors and their state health officials, because this is nasty, this is stupid, and it is endangering lives. It's not just about being quaint and I want to give somebody else peace of mind so I'll wear my mask. This is not just a violation of rights, this is actually a termination of life. Enough. 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 Well, that's it for today's rant. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you give us a thumbs up and a like. Spread this video like the spread of the coronavirus, only I'm not lethal, other than to the liberal ideology. Otherwise, this is life-affirming. This is a breath of fresh air, even through your filtered mask. Hey, make sure you're a subscriber to the channel, and smack the bell and click the word all to get notification of my next rant.